back. This is BoomerLife on CL 650.
Don't you listen to what the man said. He said.
Hey, and welcome back to BoomerLife on CL 650. I'm Zach Spencer, and with NexGen Hearing, we have Dr. Ted Venema. We're talking on this show about hearing loss and cognitive decline. But before we get back into how you test for that, Dr. Venema, NexGen Hearing is sort of new here in the Lower Mainland, but has been established over on the island. So explain what happened over the last year or so.
Well, NexGen Hearing got started on the island here. And mainland hearing got started on the mainland. And both of them were headed up by Mark Hambley, along with already seasoned or practiced hearing aid practitioners. These would consist of audiologists who were quite experienced and who ran their own retail outlets, as well as the hearing instrument specialist or practitioner who has a college diploma. And at any rate, mainland began with several offices down in the Vancouver area. NexGen began in Victoria and in the interior BC. And then last year, both branches fused together to become NexGen. And now there's some 40 offices spread across BC.
Okay, so there's really going to be one near you if you're listening to CL 650 in this area, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, on this show, we're talking about hearing loss and cognitive decline. So with that, how do you test? How do you know? I mean, hearing tests have been around for a long, long time. But explain how the two work together and how you test for both.
Okay, well, first I'll describe the hearing test, and then I'll describe some tests for cognitive decline, which, by the way, are not done by audiologists or hearing aid practitioners. They're not. These would be done by neurologists or physicians. At any rate, the hearing test is done by an audiologist or hearing instrument practitioner, and that involves putting a set of headphones on your head and testing your hearing sensitivity for your right ear and left ear separately, just like you do for your eyes. And your tones are presented, and you're in a sound-treated room that's very quiet, and they try and find out what decibel level was required for you to just barely hear this pitch. Then they give you a different pitch, and, okay, what decibel level was required for you to hear that one? They test a whole range of pitches, from bass to mids to treble, and they basically draw out what's called an audiogram showing your hearing sensitivity for each ear separately. And most people are found to have fairly decent bass hearing. Usually hearing loss in the elderly tends to affect the treble frequency. So you'd have what they call it looks like a sloping hearing loss, like a hill. Good hearing in the lows and then poorer hearing in the high pitches.
And I've had the hearing test done where they do ask you to repeat words. And you mentioned ones that sound similar, like cat and hat and things like that. So that's to see if you can hear the difference in the sounds of the words.
That's correct. Yeah, what I was outlining was what they call pure tone testing.
Yep.
And then after that, they do speech testing. That's quite correct. And they'll first test how soft you can hear speech. They'll make the speech softer and softer, and then they'll write that down. And then at a comfortable loudness level to your right ear, and then separately to your left ear, they'll say words that don't get any softer, but no context is given. In other words, it won't be "see the big black cat." It'll just say say the word tree, say the word house. There's no context, and what they're testing there is your clarity of hearing.
I also had a hearing test years ago where they added background noise. Have you ever heard of that?
Yep, that's speech and noise testing, because that's the reality, that's the real-life situation, is people are usually listening while there's some background noise, and they're usually not listening in dead quiet in a sound-treated room under headphones. So the speech ability to hear under headphones in a sound-treated room is that percent you get correct is going to be as good as it gets. Okay, hearing and noise, of course, is going to be worse.
Now, when you go to NexGen Hearing and you get a hearing test done for free, what level of hearing test are you getting done?
They will do a thorough hearing test on you, which usually comprises of pure tone testing under the headphones, and then that speech testing that we were talking about. And if need be, they'll also do a third kind of a test called tympanometry, where they examine the function of your middle ear. And they're not touching or doing anything there, but they're using instrumentation to tell whether you've got fluid behind your eardrum or whether your middle ear with the hammer, anvil, and stirrup, the little bones, whether that area is in fine working order or not. So generally, the hearing you can do a hearing screening, which is just a quick test of 4 different pitches, or you can do the whole 9 yards, and that's what's commonly done at NexGen, and that, of course, as you say, is always free. Okay, now that's the part of the hearing loss / cognitive decline. So how do you test for the cognitive part? Now that's a different kettle of fish, and what they do is there's a few different kinds of tests that are done. These are usually done more by medical practitioners or mental health nurses or whomever, but one common one is called the Mini Mental States Exam. Mini Mental States Exam. It's a MMSE. And that's on a 30-point scale. You know, if you get a high, 27 to 30, you're normal. 20 to 26, you've got mild cognitive decline. 10 to 19, you've got dementia, or 10 or less severe dementia. And are these memory tests? Is that how it works? Well, they're going to be asking you what is the year? What's the season? What's the date? What's the month? Where are we? You know, what country? Are you in a hospital? Where are you? In a house? And then they'll name 3 objects, and you'll name 3 objects, and then after you've said all of them, then you'll have the patient name the 3 objects, and you give a point for each answer. And attention and calculation. So they'll just kind of recall. They'll test for recall, and then they'll say, name this. They'll show you a pencil. They'll show you a watch. Name that. Repeat the following. No ifs, ands, or buts. Just things just to test whether you have difficulty processing and things like that. It's not extremely sensitive for the detection of mild dementia, really. Really, this test is most strong or most sensitive in detecting whether someone's got a good, really, more advanced, right? Yeah, more advanced amount, thank you, of dementia. There's also another type of test called the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and that also has a 30-point scale, and it's a little bit more sensitive for identifying early onset dementia, but a similar thing. They're showing you animals, and you name them. They'll show you some geometric shapes, so like, is this a cube, is this a sphere or a ball or whatever, but those basic things are done. But what they found is that with a lot of these tests, the hearing loss interacts with it. In other words, sometimes if they're testing someone who has hearing loss, you don't know whether it's the hearing loss that caused the poor performance or whether it was honest-to-goodness cognitive decline. Well, that makes so much sense. If you repeat this sentence, if you didn't hear it correctly, you can't repeat it correctly, right? Exactly. Like in the real world, hearing loss is trouble with treble, so people say, and I really always say that same phrase because I can't think of a more succinct way of saying it, but the symptom is I can hear, but I can't understand. I don't know what word they said. So when somebody's got that, you're going to have poorer memory, slower processing due to increased effort to hear. You're putting more of your cognitive cash, so to speak, in the act of catching up. So you've only got so much to work with. So you're going to show a deficit in something else because you're deliberately lending so much cognitive effort to listening. You're given an inordinate amount of cognitive effort to listening than the average person with normal hearing does. Do you have any? Can you cite any studies around the hearing loss and diagnosing? Yeah, dementia? I mean, there's a study on the effects of hearing loss on diagnosing dementia by Jorgensen, 2016, done in the Journal of the American Academy of Audiology, and they had 125 young normal hearing subjects were randomly assigned to 1 to 5 degrees of simulated hearing loss. Okay, so they had 125 people, and they gave them greater degrees of hearing loss with varying types of earplugs. And then they did that test. They did this mini mental states exam on them as a cognitive screener, and 16% of the people tested with mild to moderate hearing loss with the simulated hearing loss were misdiagnosed with dementia. I mean, it's just...
Well, that could be frightening too, because
sense.
if you're putting people on medication for dementia when they maybe just have a hearing problem.
Exactly. And this is the thing about hearing loss, is it's invisible. You can't see it. It's insidious. It creeps up bit by bit. It's not like one day you wake up and you can't hear. That can happen, but that's rare. It usually just creeps up on you. And it's just that the fact that it's invisible and people believe what they see. I mean, you can. We've said this in the studio too before. Like, you can see blindness, you see the cane, you see the person, and you lend an arm to help. But hearing loss doesn't work that way, and so it gets underdiagnosed, underappreciated. And people don't realize how vastly it affects things. I mean, even in young people, in students or kids in grade school, in public school, if you're not hearing the teacher properly, you're going to be assumed to be slow or have a learning disability, when guess what? You just had a hearing loss.
Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, especially with young kids, they find out, Johnny can't see properly. He's been missing all of this work because he needed glasses. Well, the same thing could be true for hearing loss.
Yep.
All right, Dr. Ted Venema is our guest from NexGen Hearing, and as we mentioned in that previous, in the beginning of this segment, I should say that they do offer hearing tests for free, and it's definitely worth taking advantage of. When we come back, we're going to get into more of the conversation around cognitive decline and hearing loss on CL 650.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CL 650.